This is the second part of our series of 4 lectures, Immune Mechanism and Ayurveda. We all are aware that this is a COVID-19 pandemic situation, and all of a sudden immunity has become the keyword, watchword, and this is a high time to review, to understand, to compile about modern updated concepts in immunity and to have some Ayurvedic perspective commentary over it. This lecture series is attempt for the same. On this same platform, that is Ayurveda Network BHU, part 1 was uploaded, which was about the basic overview of immune mechanism. In the part 1, we understood about the history, basic physiology, T cell, B cell, may it be cell mediated, humoral, may it be innate or adaptive immune mechanism. Then all the anatomy and physiology, all rest of the organs involved in it. And what can be Ayurvedic complement, whether it is only Bala, whether it is only 𝑉𝐸𝑒𝑐𝐿, which 𝑠harira-bhava are included in Ayurvedic conceptualization of immunity. That is what the overview we had taken in part 1. Now let us start with this part 2, which is titled as Systemic Interactions of Immune Physiology and Ayurveda. At the outset, again, what I had said in the first part only, that I am preferring to use the word immune mechanism rather than immune system, because this is not some standalone kind of, some seclusive kind of working system, but it is, the immune mechanism is involved in each and every another system, each and every all body mechanisms. That is why this is second part is dedicated to systemic interactions of immune physiology, and we'll try to understand Ayurvedic complement of it also. So in this we will try to understand that what are the immune phenomena and how they are associated with another body organs. So we will just overview about concept of inflammation, how there is a bilateral interaction between nervous and immune system, then the much talked gut-brain mechanism. So there is another term, gut-brain immune axis. Let us also talk about lung, liver and gut axis. This is another important phenomenon in this context because COVID-19 is affecting our lungs, our respiratory mechanism, so this is quite relevant. Immunometabolism is it's not just new interface, but it is becoming a new discipline. There are dedicated journals to it. So immunometabolism, the interface between immunity and metabolism. And then what is talked more about in last 2 decades, Psycho-Neuro-Endocrino immunology. And at the last, behavioral immune mechanism or behavioral immune system, and how immune mechanism is associated with behavioral things. We will try to understand all these things, and then we will try to make some comment that can add some value to the Ayurvedic understanding or Ayurvedic translation of it. So to start with inflammation, we all are graduate, postgraduate scholars and practitioners. So we all know that these are the non-infectious factors, these are the infectious factors. So there are physical reasons, chemical reasons, there are biological reasons, even psychological, even excitement can lead to inflammation. So this is the etiology of inflammation, hetu, what we say in Ayurveda. What is basic of inflammatory response? It is the redness, it is the heat, that is because of increased diameter of vessel, and then there is pain and there is edema because of increased permeability. And then I remember there are many scholars in Ayurveda who have attempted to correlate this with Raktadik Vatrakta, because in Raktadik Vatrakta you get the similar things that rubor, calor, and everything, all these 4 symptoms, you get it there. Classically, the verse matches with this very well. So let us not go into that. At the end, we will make Ayurvedic comments on it. But this is the basic physiology, that redness and heat is because of increased diameter, whereas pain and edema is increased permeability. So how is immune mechanism associated with inflammation? Inflammation is not our topic here. We are speaking about immunity mechanism, immune mechanism. So how immune mechanism or immune cells are involved in it, how immune cytokines or cells are involved in it, let us see one by one. We all are aware that inflammation is having 4 steps. One is recognition of the insult. Second is recruitment of all white blood cells, those are necessary for this response. Third is removal, actual attack on the pathogen and killing it and removal of it. And lastly, there is repair, repairing the tissue, repairing the damage. These are the 4 stages. So in first stage, recognition, so you can find sentinel cells everywhere. There are Kupffer cells in liver. Even our spleen has got splenic macrophages. We are talking about COVID, so we all are aware that lung tissue is basically of 3 kinds of cells are there: pneumocyte 1, pneumocyte 2, and alveolar macrophages. So like alveolar macrophages, there are macrophages in peritoneum also. And then microglial cells in your brain, Langerhans cells in epithelial tissues, mast cells. So these all cells, they have scavenger receptors, and they are able to recognize the damage associated molecular patterns or pathogen associated molecular patterns. So these all cells, they belong to the immune mechanism only. So far as recruitment is concerned, these cells, they secrete TNF alpha, IL-1, and then it acts on endothelial cells, and then it allows WBCs to recruit at the site of inflammation. These both cytokines, they again act as pyrogen at the level of brain, and then there is exogenous hyperthermia, fever is there. Again the same TNF alpha and IL-1, they travel to liver and they release this MBN, and thereby they activate the complement protein mechanism. So the membrane attack complex is activated. Also degranulation of mast cells will release into histamine, which is vasodilator, and that's why there will be endothelial retractions. 2 endothelial cells will get retracted, and then thereby WBCs will be able to escape it and they can reach the infection site. So this is the way neutrophil and as well as albumin escapes from the vessel and moves in the interstitial fluid. We will not go into albumin and all those things because inflammation is not the topic. Here the topic is immune mechanism and inflammation. Removal, in actual removal, yes, this is the duty of immune mechanism only. There are macrophages and neutrophils. Those actually do the function of phagocytosis. And once the removal of pathogen is over, all that tissue damage is recovered with EGF, that is epidermal growth factor, or all these 2-3 factors are there. These all tissue repair factors are again ignited by alpha-1 and IL-6. So the inflammation and its 4 steps, they are not only closely associated with immunity, but in fact they are controlled by immune mechanism only. So these are the cytokines in column number 1. In column number 2, they belong to which family? Then what is the source of those cytokines? That is mentioned in 3rd column. And what are its different functions? So as we can see, there are cytokines which are pro-inflammatory, some are anti-inflammatory, some activate NK cells, some are innate immune mechanism or macrophage responsible for macrophage activations. Some are there for T cell, B cell proliferation or differentiation. So all these things, this is how cytokines are involved in inflammation. So far as immune cells and inflammation are concerned, what are the cells in acute inflammation? Mainly neutrophils. In acute allergies, eosinophils and mast cells. So far as chronic inflammation is concerned, there are macrophages, plasma cells, lymphocytes. Also fibroblast and myofibroblast will come later. Also eosinophils. Now talk about neuro-immune bilateral relationship. The nervous mechanism is the very primary mechanism of human body. We all are aware that there are only two basic systems. One is nervous system and another is endocrine system. So nervous, being the very basic or foundational body system, is very closely associated and bilaterally associated with immune mechanism. So although not lymphatics, but CNS has got MHC, that is major histocompatibility complex. Then there is mechanism of blood-brain barrier, and CSF is there to ensure the protection. The immunosurveillance and integrity of brain is because of microglia and the immune cells only. These cells are able to activate adaptive immune mechanism whenever required. Also, peripheral immune cells can reach inflammatory site in CNS. And T cells, most importantly T cells, they are able to travel into CNS through the transient interaction with CNS endothelium. And lastly, the interface between blood-brain has got epithelium, which expresses 𝐷 molecules and other immune cells, also macrophages and dendritic cells, and they are located at where they can promote antigen presentation and have a powerful inflammatory response. So the control is two-way. It is immune mechanism that is controlled by nervous system. At the same time, nervous system is controlled by partially it is controlled by immune mechanism. So what is control of immune mechanism? How it is associated with, which are the organs or body phenomena those are responsible for control of immune mechanism? One by one, of course there are many, this is a basic compilation. The foremost is neural reflexes, they regulate immune system. Nerves, individually the standalone nerves can sense the inflammation and they can interact with leukocytes. Thirdly, vagus is most important, and vagus has got profound role. There is so many mechanisms and so many publications over it. Then there is immune system as a control of immune system, particularly T cells. And although there are many hormones and so many things involved, but leptin can be considered as pivotal. We all are aware about leptin. It is the hormone responsible for our food behavior, for our appetite, hunger behavior, and our fatty tissue metabolism. So that is there again responsible for control of immune mechanism. So let us try to understand the control of immune mechanism and how it is done by all these things. Neural reflexes. So as here is cited in, this is the journal Advances in Physiological Education by American Society of Physiology. So an anatomic and molecular framework for sensing and regulating immune system activity in a reflexive manner in the neural circuits. So this is the anatomical basis of it. Stress activates neural circuits in the brain, and these stress-induced alterations in brain activity, they lead to the brain-controlled outflow pathways, which are mainly mediated to what? Either hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis or sympathetic nervous system, and the hormones and transmitters released by these outflow pathway bind the receptors expressed by immune cells and immune organs, and thereby dramatically alter the immune function. So that is how the relationship from brain to immune mechanism is. So these are the neural nerve alone, as I said a few minutes before, nerve alone is able to do so many things. Sensory neurons, they again express the PRR, that is pattern recognition receptors. So they are like the another receptors also. And these receptors are for cytokine and prostaglandins, and they provide molecular mechanism for CNS to acquire the information on localized inflammation in the periphery. Sensory nerves, the second thing, sensory nerves can respond to the presence of microbial products independent of immune activation. That's why it was said before a few minutes that nerves standalone can interact with immune mechanism. They can have activity, they can express the leukocytes and everything. So independent of immune activation. Thirdly, autonomic nerves innervate in lymphoid tissues and even other organs, and thereby they regulate the immune response. So autonomic nerve endings are there in lymphoid tissue and other organs, we are aware. So that is one way, again, they are regulating the immune response. It was proven somewhere that sympathetic nervous system controls anti-influenza CD8 T cell responses. Also, neuronally released sympathetic neurotransmitters, they stimulate splenic interferon secretions from T cells. That is again published somewhere. So there are sensory nerves, those form a dense network throughout the external surfaces of the body, that is skin and all. This innervation provides the anatomic basis for precise sensing of this by the CNS for pathogen invasion, tissue damage and inflammation. And lastly, reciprocally, a range of the range of cells express receptors for neurotransmitters including dopamine, ACH and norepinephrine. So those can again regulate the leukocyte activity as well as differentiation. So that is how it is both way, brain to immune. The last one is vagus nerve has got role in thermoregulatory response to the systemic inflammation. So although I have not put this in the presentation, there are few papers on the electroacupuncture. So they have studied electroacupuncture and its immune responses very thoroughly. And that's why, as the second point in this slide says, that vagus nerve stimulation can improve symptoms in rheumatoid arthritis. So this is very analogous, this is very similar with our concept of Agni Karma. So far as concept of Agni Karma is concerned, there is very less literature available about its mode of action. So Chinese electroacupuncture is the thing where there are numerous publications, and they have proved that this electroacupuncture or somewhat kind of Agni Karma phenomenon, this actually stimulates the local nerves. And these local nerves, when they get stimulated, they are able to have the immune response. So the Ayurvedic concept or the Ayurvedic therapy of Agni Karma can be having its mode of action as immunomodulatory. And even there are practitioners, those are using Agni Karma not only for pain elevation, but for another systemic diseases, for the conditions like ILI, influenza-like illnesses or pneumonia-like conditions. There are Agni Karma practitioners who used to do Agni Karma at the base of the lungs, and there are particular points for that. So that is how nervous stimulation can improve the immune mechanism is an important part. Moving to the another T cells, yes, T cells in the control of immune mechanism, they are very important. Because T cell deficient mice were failed for in few models, so T cells are important as a control mechanism. Immune cells themselves as a control of immune mechanism. So here the immune cells themselves, they can synthesize and they can secrete several hormones with immunomodulatory properties. Lymphocytes and macrophages, they can produce peptides and catecholamines like norepinephrine, epinephrine. Again, this is interesting. We all are aware that lymphocytes secrete the growth hormone. So this is again how the Neuro-Endocrino bilateral relationship is there. Monocytes secrete brain-deprived neurotropic factor. Again, circulating LPS are able to induce the transcription of genes encoding for CD14. So that is how immune cells themselves, they are responsible for control mechanism. Leptin is perhaps the last thing so far as control of immune mechanism is concerned. It is the hormone that controls our food behavior, our lipid metabolism it is associated with. So leptin increases phagocytic activity and cytokine secretions. So Th1 response is associated with it. Also, it is related with upregulating the expression for activation markers. Also, leptin can stimulate the chemotaxis, or it can sustain proliferation, development, activation and differentiation, and even the lytic action of NK cells, that is natural killer cells. Leptin exerts its effects also on adaptive immunity. So it is associated with even the immune memory component, that is memory CD4 cells. Leptin also supports immune cells migration to the inflammatory sites. So that is how again leptin is having one more role. Leptin inhibits thymic T cell apoptosis. Then T regulatory cells produce leptin. So it is the whole complex, and there are so many things, there are so many pathways, but leptin is amongst those the pivotal ones, amongst those the very central ones. So leptin signaling at CNS is itself able to directly modulate the immune system. So leptin is very important, and there are publications, I guess it is published in Nature Medicine, that why obesity, because see, obesity is the most important comorbidity so far as COVID is concerned. So why it is so? What can be the probable mechanism? So there are propositions that leptin is the key factor. Now immune to brain. So brain to immune, immune to brain, that is what we were talking. So immune to brain communication is basically pro-inflammatory cytokines, and those are released by activated immune cells. So it's a broad area of physiological, behavioral and hormonal changes. So whenever infection is there, from that infection site there is release of pro-inflammatory cytokines, and that is the communication from inflammatory site to brain. And this comprises all these things, physiological things, even behavioral things. Withdrawal is the distinct feature there. Hormonal changes, and this together is called as sickness behavior. What the sickness behavior includes? It includes pain, fatigue, altered sleep pattern, anorexia and fever. So these are the symptoms. These are sick animals, they also exhibit it, and the sick humans also exhibit them, and this is sickness behavior. So when infected with a pathogen, many species display behavioral responses called as sickness behavior. It includes even depression, lethargy, hypersomnia, anorexia, reduced drinking, diminished libido, social withdrawal, and even reduced grooming. So all these symptoms, whenever Ayurvedic person learns them, what he recalls usually ek Charak Sutra Sthan 16, Chikitsa Pravrit. Bahudoshavastha are the symptoms, or another is Jwara, the concept of Jwara, because there is important symptom like Arati. So some pathogens may manipulate even behavior directly, like rabies, we all know. So that is how sickness is the component. So this was all about the bilateral relationship between nervous system and immune mechanism. This is the figure that comprises all in a nutshell. Moving to gut-brain immune axis, we all are aware that the healthy bacteria, the commensal bacteria, is critical and it is very essential for optimally functioning immune system. Various studies have shown that individual species of gut microbiota can vary different type of immune cells. They can induce different type of immune cells. And then there is again so many literature available about it, that how this gut-brain axis is associated with immune mechanism also. So this is the figure from one of the publication. On one side there is balanced microbiota, on another side there is dysbiosis, that is the microbiota is now disbalanced. So in a balanced microbiota, what we get a balance of pro-inflammatory bacteria and T-regulatory bacteria. So we have seen in the part 1, we have seen that Th1 and Th2, that is the whole crux. So T effector and T regulator, the balance is there. This is the balanced microbiota that leads to the T effector and T regulatory balance situation, and that leads to no disease. Whereas when dysbiosis is there, there is either one side pro-inflammatory and T regulatory bacteria. There is the dysbiosis, there is the equilibrium is lost, and this leads to autoimmunity, allergy or cancer. However, there are many gaps. What are other factors and which actually are more species of microbiomes? Those are T regulatory inducing. Is there any feedback mechanism? So there are so many gaps, but this is the model that balanced microbiota and dysbiosis can be one of the major reasons behind the normal and abnormal infections. So this is again very interesting, and this is relevant because we are in the COVID pandemic, that lung-liver-gut axis. In fact, there is lung-gut axis. And this is one more proposed by few, that it's a lung, liver and gut axis. So there is increasing evidence that indicates that the critical role of constitutive sensing of microbes and their metabolites to maintain the homeostasis of immune system. In the microbial communities of gut, these two are responsible for so-and-so, and these two are responsible for so-and-so sites, that is in the gut and that is in the lung. So they are at the both places. The microbiota is not only in your gut, but it is in your lungs. Lungs are also continuously exposed thing. So gut-lung axis, this is quite beautiful, and for Ayurvedic physician and for Ayurvedic physiologist, this is what I found to very close to my heart, because we have believed in that pranavahanam srutasam hrudayamoolam mahasrutascha. We are the fraternity who consider mahasrutas, the gastrointestinal tract, as one of the moolasthana of pranavasrutas. And there is a concept in so far as the science of microbiota is concerned, that there is an axis, gut-lung axis, and they both are connected with each other. There is list of, you can see over here, there is list of the microbiota which is there in lungs, also which is there in gut, and how the relationship is there. The relationship is via obviously inflammatory mediators, and the fluid that is going to be communicated between these two organs is going to be again lymph only. So the lymph flow and blood flow is responsible for this. So how the lymphatic migration takes place this way, whereas bacterial seeding takes place this way. This is the gut-lung axis. The axis allows for the passage of endotoxins, microbial metabolites, cytokines and hormones into bloodstream, connecting the gut niche with that one of the lung. Inflammation occurring in the lung-gut axis can induce changes in the blood as well as in gut microbiota. So this is again very close to Ayurvedic philosophy, Ayurvedic technology. Well, there is a growing evidence. Okay. When we are speaking about gut microbiota and its immune role in immune mechanism. This is again interesting. There is a growing evidence that gut is linked with lung and liver via dietary factors. Epidemiological studies show that diet containing rich fiber is associated with decreased risk of COPD and better lung function. Why this is so? Why is fiber-rich food associated with de-risking of COPD? The reason can be fiber is the remaining substance in the food that cannot be further digested, and this fiber, this undigested fiber, acts as a source of nutrition for most of the beneficial bacteria. So this is again very important component so far as healthy how the response is going to be. You can see here there is liver, there is muscle, there is adipose tissue, leptin we were talking about. So that immune mechanism is related with so many things, and there is therapeutic application also. So these commensal bacteria, they affect the process of airway infectious disease via local and distal immune modulation. So there are uses of probiotics, and there are publications that they have shown some promising results to the cell signaling and differentiation, and that will lead to again different subsets of immune cells to adopt unique metabolic programs. So that is how they both are immunity and metabolism. They are very closely associated with each other. This is one wonderful publication. This is a figure where they have comprehended the whole life and its stages. The green color that stands for physiological condition, red stands for pathological condition. The first column is for pregnancy or embryonic life, second column is for infancy, third is adult, and last is elderly. So how the metabolic health and immune system. So what is the status? As you can see in infants, so there is less inflammation, there is healthy microbiome, whereas in adult there is adipose tissue, whereas in elderly there is sarcopenia as an abnormality. As a physiological thing, there is insulin resistance, atherosclerosis. So at the three levels, physiological condition, immunity and metabolism, pathological condition, immunity and metabolism, this is how they have tried to summarize the whole life. Immune metabolic interaction throughout life. That is what they have in this figure. When we are speaking about metabolism and immunity, this is important to note at least the Warburg effect. In 1930, the Warburg made the stunning discovery that cancer cells rely on glycolysis for generation of energy, even when sufficient oxygen is present. So even when there is another media for oxygen, these cells, they have the tendency to rely upon glycolysis. So Warburg metabolism lead to the increased production of metabolites which support cell division and proliferation. And further, these metabolites and ROS, reactive oxygen species, or even RNS, they accumulate during this process and they can enhance the inflammation. And the similar process to the Warburg metabolism occurs not just during cancer but even in many immune diseases. So the basic phenomenon happening here is the abnormal glycolysis or relying upon glycolysis for energy. So thus Warburg had showed that glycolysis rather than oxidative metabolism is the favored metabolic program for stimulated leukocytes. So that is how chronic inflammation, cancer and immune mechanism, they share this baseline abnormality in cellular metabolism, and that is what. And using this, now there are proposals to target cellular metabolism in immune diseases. So it can be two-way, targeting immune mechanisms in metabolic diseases, or as in this slide we are seeing, targeting cellular metabolism in immune diseases. So targeting cellular metabolism is becoming another interesting target, another interesting therapeutic purpose. So recently it has been shown that manipulating metabolic pathways of cancer cells or T cells, this can enhance anti-cancer immunity, or they can suppress the tumor growth. For instance, metmorphin, an anti-diabetic drug, enhances the development of memory T cells. This is very important because if you see the COVID-related publications, there are scientists who are proposing metmorphin for better outcome in COVID-19. So there are such publications because metmorphin, as said here in this slide, it's an anti-diabetic drug, but it enhances development of memory T cells by switching the cellular metabolism from glycolysis to mitochondrial one. So even metmorphin and growth hormone, the combination is being tried for regeneration of thymus. Is there any probability of regeneration of thymus is the basic question. But if one is able to reverse the thymus, because thymus gets shrinked in old age, and that is why older people are more prone, they get bad prognosis in COVID-19. So what they are proposing, in fact, what they are already experimented with, they have experimented with growth hormone plus metmorphin for regeneration, for probability of regeneration in thymus. So that is how targeting metabolism is going to help us for making immune responses. So this is again how the blocking of glucose and glutamine metabolism will help in lymphocyte activation. And then there are many of these, how targeting metabolism will help us to restructure the response. So in a nutshell, immune metabolism, on right side there is cellular metabolism, you can see regulatory, and then infections and autoimmunity can result as an abnormality in it. On the left side you can see systemic metabolism, you can see adipose tissue, liver and pancreas. The above, the upper side indicates homeostasis and the basal side indicates inflammation. So that is how one author has put the whole immune metabolism in a. So this is all about the brain controlling everything, and there is adipose tissue via leptin. There are gut hormones. We have already talked about gut. Gut is innerved with vagus, and vagus is the direct communication with brain. And another important pathway is insulin resistance. So that is how the metabolism and hormones and immune mechanism goes on. Moving to the next, Neuro-Endocrino-Immuno. So CNS is there, gut is there, and immune mechanism is there. So the whole dance is going this way. The whole interplay is going this way. So this is the second last thing, PNIE, that is Psycho-Neuro-Endocrino Immunology. There are dedicated journals to this. So this is emerging as a discipline. This is there in the postgraduate syllabus of Ayurvedic post-graduation education of Sharir Kriya. So what it is all about? It is all about putting together. It is all about comprehending the psychological component, neuro component, endocrino component, and immunological component. Because stress has got all the effects at all levels, biological level, psychological level, social level, and okay. This is again related with a macrophage theory of depression. There is macrophage theory of depression. And these both things are related with this. On the right side, you can see in this box that chronic immune activation is always, it's said to be associated with depression. So the chronic immune activation, so may it be immunotherapy, may it be somatic disorders, or may it be aging, that is seen associated with depression. So this is again a wonderful diagram from one of the publication. Let us start from this. Let us start from the right. Systemic infection, peripheral cytokines, then pro-inflammatory signaling to the brain, and this is going to make changes in neuronal function that will lead to sickness behavior. We have seen sickness behavior, and if that is compensation if not happened, then that can actually lead to clinical depression. So this is all about the stress and psycho-neuro-immuno-endocrinological axis, how the HPA, how the ANS, how the obesity, how the insulin resistance, all these factors, how they are playing role, the IL-6, the cortisol, how they are playing role. This is the whole interplay of psycho-neuro-immuno-endocrinology. So that is how immune mechanism is closely associated with many another things. And this is interesting. This is recently this publication has came. Ayurveda and COVID-19, where psycho-neuro-immunology and the meaning response meet. So I just saw if it is written by some Ayurvedic author or not, but the author is from the psychiatry background, and this is the publication in the journal Brain Behavior and Immunity. So even the fraternity outside Ayurveda, they are aware that this potential of PNIE, there is a lot of Ayurvedic, there is a lot of potential in Ayurveda so far as PNIE is. And lastly, behavioral immune mechanism. So behavioral systems, because any stressful stimulus is going to have its effect. The effect is there will be release of cortisol and non-epinephrine, and then there will be the response at the level of immune system also. So the sympathetic fibers descend from brain and into most of the lymphoid organs, where they release neuropeptides and neurotransmitters. Those can actually modulate immune functions. So in all these psychological components, there is important aspect, that is behavioral immune system. This word was coined by Mark Schaller, and this is his publication, where he done one experiment where he showed the two photographs to the volunteers. The first photograph A is that somebody is pointing gun towards you, whereas another image was that someone is ill. And you can just see here the guns and the disease, just see the graph. Change in IL-6, interleukin 6, you can see it is quite heavy, it is quite elevated in those who were given stimulus that somebody is ill and somebody is having cough or somebody is having some infection. So that is how merely visual response is going to alter that is going to aggress your immune response. So this was the basic experiment, after which Mark Schaller came up with the concept of BIS, that is behavioral immune system. So it is seen even in animals, because animals, they tend to retract when they get infected. So we were speaking that there is reduced grooming, there is withdrawal, there is less drinking, there is less anger. So that is how the behavioral component of immunism is there. And BIS in humans, it is referred as disgust. In humans, most support for the existence of the BIS, that is behavioral immune system, comes from the extensive studies of emotional and physical reaction that is commonly referred as disgust. So what this disgust is, that is we vomit. There is increase in bodily secretions. So this is very interesting. And when an Ayurvedic person reads this, what he obviously recalls is the symptom, the very basic symptom in Jwara is arati. Kuch to hota hai, I am disturbed, I am not well. So what do you mean by not well? The patient is unable to tell. But that is what arati is, santapo deha manasa. That is why in Jwara chapter we get symptoms like they don't like kids. Kids are too good there to interact with. But when one is having Jwara, there is symptom that they dislike kids. Or interestingly, the Vagbhata has quoted Kalyanaka Ghritam in Unmad chapter, but in Sushrut you will get it in Jwara. So that is how the sickness behavior or this disgust component is there scattered everywhere in Ayurveda. Arati is one of the important place, and we can find it in Jwara. So that was all about immune mechanism and how other systems are involved in it. So what it can be in a nutshell, what can be the summary? In the center you can see there is core immune system, that is immune cells, lymphoids, spleen, liver, cytokines. And then there are four important things. One is immunometabolism, we have seen. Another we have seen was gut-brain immune axis, gut-lung-liver axis. Another important thing we saw that PNIE, Psycho-Neuro-Immuno-Endocrinology. And lastly was the psychological or behavioral component. There is one more thing that, as if you are able to recall in the lecture 1 we had seen, that it's not distinguishing about self and non-self, but immune system distinguishes danger and non-danger. That is another important thing. And inflammation is the key factor. This is the whole summary of it. And how are we going to translate this in Ayurveda? Now comes the important part. So metabolism, immune metabolism, obviously we need to consider Agni, all this Trayodasha Agni, that must be pivotal in our thinking of immunity. Then we had seen about lung, liver, Mahasrotas, obviously, Pitta, Rakta, Majja, because Yakrut, liver is the Mulasthan of Rakta, Vasrotas. Then Majja is the brain, so that is the way Prana, Rakta, Pitta, Majja are going to be the things so far as gut-brain immune axis is concerned. The core itself will be Rasa, Rakta, Majja, Shukra, because Rasa, Rakta are actually what circulating is, and Majja or Shukra are the one where Acharyas have clearly quoted Bala as a function of. Acharyas haven't quoted, I guess only Ashtanga Sangraha is there to quote Bala as a function of Mouse Dhatu, but Charaka and Sushruta has preferred to quote Bala as a function of Majja and Shukra. So that will remain in the center. PNIE, Psycho-Neuro-Immuno-Endocrinology, so Prana, Agni, Dhattvagni and Ojas will be their role. And behavioral and psychological part is again associated with Prana, Manas or even Sadhak Pitta. So let us see, let us make a brief, and these are the inflammation related. Where can we actually find inflammation in Ayurveda? It can be obviously in Shotha, Trishotha. Charaka has very precisely mentioned the sites, local sites for chronic inflammation, but chronic and acute inflammation, both of them. But I guess these 5 chapters are very important so far as inflammation is concerned. One is Jwara, because infection originated and acute kind of inflammation we need to see in Jwara only. Shotha is very obvious. Gulma is very important because what inflammation is going to lead? It is going to lead to pain. What is where do we find the concept of pain in Ayurveda? It is not only in Vatvyadhi, but Gulma. Gulma is the site for pain. So Gulma is the site for pain, and that is why Gulma indicates so many local inflammations. Sthaulya and Meha we can find the pathways of inflammation. And Vatarakta is again very tissue specific inflammatory things we can certainly see in the chapter of Vatarakta. So there is role of Vayu as well as there is role of Dushita Rakta. Even Gulma is because of Rakta only. Rakta Dushti is very closely associated with Gulma. So that is the concept of inflammation if one need to see. And one more important thing, that Shota is not every time Santarpanottha. Even the concept of inflammation is not every time Santarpanottha. There are degenerative inflammatory diseases too. Even in coronary vessel disease, there are necrotic plaques are seen. Alzheimer, Parkinson's, they are considered to be degenerative inflammatory diseases. Macular degeneration, everybody is suffering from it. Everybody is suffering. That is again age associated. That is again degeneration associated. So usually we think that Shotha, it must be pro-inflammatory, so it is something Santarpanottha. It is not like that every time. So that is how we need to understand inflammation in our. This was the interesting theory that it's not danger, it's danger, but it's not self and non-self. So that was very path-breaking thing in the history of immunology. We have this beautiful concept, what Dallana is quoting. How is he defining Shalya? Just see. Na kevalam kashtadranadi shalyam, kintu atipravruddham maladoshajam va sharirinam sthavaranjangamanam 𝐻𝐴𝐻𝐿 badhakaram sharire tat sarvameva pravadanti shalyam. This is quoting Dallana very precisely. This is so beautiful. It took 2000, the year 2000 was there noted in the history of immunology. Until 2000 they were considering the theory of self and non-self. But by the 1994 first publication came, and by 2000 what they are quoting, no, it's not self and non-self, but it's about whether it is dangerous or it is non-dangerous. That is to be recognized by immune mechanism. Darlana has already beautifully quoted this. 𝐻𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷𝑦𝑢𝑥 𝐷𝑚. Even the concept of vrana. What is concept of vrana? It is sharir as well as agantu. What is sharir vrana? What is sharir vrana? It is internal vrana. It is systemic vrana. So this concept of danger and non-danger, we need to see in Shella chapters. There is also immune mechanism. Immune mechanism is not only in Jwara and Prameha, acute and chronic. No. You need to go to the Sushruta and you need to understand immune mechanism even there. So that was about danger and non-danger. We had seen the behavioral component as well as we have seen the psychological component, P and IE. So how the manas, there can be so many lecture series on role of manas. I am simply here compiling the Agrasangra of Charaka, Sankalpu Vrishyanam, Daurmanasyam Avrishyanam, Vishadu Rogavardhananam, Harshaha Priyananam, Shokaha Shoshananam, Saumanasyam Garbhadharananam, Trupti Aharagunanam, Nivritti Pushtikaranam. What this is all about is, this is the rule of manas that is associated with so many things. It is associated with metabolism, Harsha Pridananam, and Shoka Shoshananam. How can tissue is going to enhance or tissue is going to deplete? It is via the metabolic mechanism only. Metabolism is associated with immunity only. So that is how the role of manas is Ayurveda already quoted with. We need to come up with the precise cascades. It is there already in Ayurveda. That is what we everybody every time say like this, but that is not going to be the way. We need to come up with very precise networks. This is the foundation Charaka has given us. There is a lot we can work. Now coming to Agni. So Agni has immunometabolism. Agni has remained very important so far as immune mechanism is concerned. So how to enhance Agni? We need good immune response. So we need good metabolism. We need good Agni. So what do we give? What it comes to our graduate's mind, what it comes first. In North India, any Ayurvedic graduate, whenever if you speak about him about Agni and metabolism, the first drug he will talk about will be 𝘉𝘢𝘵𝘍𝑠𝑘𝑟. In South India, he will talk about that 𝑠hadraranam churnam. But it is the only thing that giving some Pachak Churna, giving some Shadharana, giving Shunti to all those in these situations to enhance immunity or another situations is the sole way. No, certainly not. The concept of Agni is very basic. Say for example, only Vyayama leads to Dosha Kshaya and Agni Vriddhi. So when we are thinking about Agni, we just can't skip the concept of dosha. They are mutually interdependent. The concept of Agni, this is the core of Ayurvedic physiology. The Agni and dosha, they are mutually interdependent. And that is why it's not only about giving Shunti to people or giving 𝘉𝘢𝘵𝑎𝑠𝑘𝑟 Churna or giving some Shadharan Churna to people. No, that is not the sole way. Just get back to the basics. I have simply copy-pasted the Sushru from Grady Chikitsa only. Charakacharya has very well elaborated how Agni Dushti is associated with dosha. How it is associated with. So you can see here the verse number 200. Deepanam bahupiktasya tiktam madhur sanyutam bahuvatasya tu sneha lavana amla sanyutam. So if it is bahuvata, you need to give sneha lavana amlayuta. If it is bahupiktasya, you need to give tikta madhur grita. Snehamaiva param vidya durbalan ladipanam. No, it's not Shunti Churna, it's not Shadharan Churna. It is Snehamaiva param vidya durbalan ladipanam. Because Agni is restored with only Sneha and Sneha only. How it is, that is given in further verses. And then the Charakacharya speaks about how the Agni can be deteriorated because of different pathways, because of different hetus, and how are you going to treat them in a very different manner. In somewhere you need Deepana 𝑓𝐷𝑒𝑟𝑒 somewhere you are going to need something 𝑔𝘪𝑡 𝘠𝑉𝑛𝐴 I'm not going to read it, it's already 55 minutes. I'm not reading it. This is Charaka Grahani Chikitsa. Raukchat Mandanale Pibet Sarpi Tailava Deepana. So if it is because of Ruksha Guna, you need to give this precise thing. Atisneha tu mandayagnav. If the mandagni is because of atisneha, excess of cheese or ghee or like of things, you need to use churna arishta asava. Every time you are not going to use that, you are Lavana Bhaskar churna. The commentary over immune metabolism, because immunity and associated with it. Psycho-Neuro-Immuno Endocrino, that is all these days put together. So prana is very closely associated with all these things. With psycho it is associated, with neuro it is associated, even endocrino, agni and prana are interdependent, and immuno. So that is how the agni and prana that is dependent. Agni is again Shakti. We just saw a few minutes before. That sneham param vidya durbanal dipanam. For Agni you need to give sneha only. Why? Because sneha acts on dhatu. Sneha acts on this triad of pitta rakta majja. And in turn it makes Agni better. And this way, if portion is done well, there will be abundant of, there will be plenty of soma or ojas, and there will be protection of 𝑔𝘪𝑚. About how immune mechanism is associated with other body systems. And then, considering all these things, we need to pick up the proper tool for the treatment that will cover the whole pathway, that will cover the whole cascade, that will cover the whole things, that will cover all those dots. That yes, lung is there, there is liver is there. Yes, liver is found to be just recently, last week it is published in BMJ Gut, British journal, Gut. They have published that how fatty liver is coming as emerging as an important comorbidity, not only comorbidity, but for as a marker of severe disease of COVID-19. So we need to pick all those dots, that liver is there, lung is there, agni is there, dosha is there. So you need to come up with this, and we need to join dots. So let us take just one example of Langana. This is, I guess, second last slide. How Langana is associated. Just let us just see. Langana is quoted as treatment of Rasavasrutas in Charaka Vimanstan 5. We all are aware. This is again, we all are aware that caloric restriction, it is already proven for so many things. It protects against CVD, protects against age-related diabetes, it delays osteoporosis, it protects colon health. So many things that those are already proven. Let us just take as an example Langana and how it is associated with so many things and how it is associated with immune mechanism, and we'll conclude. So caloric restriction, we are taking Langana as an example only, one of the mechanisms we are just to conclude this commentary. Langana in immune mechanism, CR, that is caloric restriction, it is proven to elevate the pro-inflammatory cells in various tissues. CR, that is caloric restriction, it attenuates aging associated cell type specific gene expression changes. Also, the number of immune cells in nearly every tissue studied was dramatically increased in control rats aged, but was not in the affected by age with restricted calories. And lastly, this is one from the very prominent journal Cell, the last citation. Inflammatory response during aging could be systematically repressed by caloric restriction. There is one more way for this interpretation of caloric restriction. So this leads to production of so-called beige adipose tissue, the fatty adipose tissue that is associated with lean and healthy phenotypes. So caloric restriction leads to the preferential glucose uptake in white fat, and thereby they lead to the development of that healthy fat or the functional beige fat. So as an immune mechanism, we just try to understand. So in a similar way, there can be studies and there can be, because see, immune mechanism is all about balance of pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory mechanisms. So we already have the concept of 𝘉𝑚 Santarpana Apatarpaniya. We have always believed it was they say that it is Clyde Bernard who is the pioneer of systems biology. Clyde Bernard has believed in the homeostasis of your internal milieu. But it is our Charaka who has already labeled the chapters as 𝘉𝑚 Santarpana Apatarpaniya. The concept of balance, the concept of homeostasis has remained pivotal in our thinking. So immune mechanism this is the take home message, this is the last slide. Immune mechanism is not something that is working in seclusion. Almost all the systems, they are connected with immune mechanism. So all the pathways there is role of immune mechanism. So what is all about is, it is all about to maintain homeostasis. It is body's response to maintain 𝑠𝑚𝑦𝑜Ｇ and 20 sharir gunas, and that is why immune response is not something that works as a separate thing, but it is associated with all the systems, all the another body tissues and organs. They all come together. This is in harmony with everything, and that is why I had dedicated this second lecture to understand how immune mechanism is associated with the another systems. So this was the part 2. In part 3 we will see immune responses and variables and immune pathology, how environment is going to affect, how nutrition, age, exercise is going to affect, and we will again try to comment on Ayurvedic complement of it. And in the last part we will actually move to immunomodulatory functions of our herbs and our medicines. Thank you very much.